Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we've got a very special guest with us today, Dougal Cameron, who is the founder and president of Cameron Management, which owns and operates buildings throughout Texas. Dougal, thanks for being with us today.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, you and I have kind of known of each other for a long time in Texas, but it's fun to get the story, and we always try to start with just some context. Where did you grow up? What was your family like? Was there any spiritual formation growing up? That sort of thing.
Well, so my mom and dad are both from Central Texas. They met at Angelo State Junior College. My dad played football at the University of Texas. My mom was a Texas Tech cheerleader. And my dad went on to be a career officer in the Marine Corps. So we moved around a bit. And I would say I thought of myself as a God-oriented person. We sort of went to church. Churches on military bases back in those days were almost universally bland. Just be good. And it was a kind of a really it was a milquetoast kind of liberal Christianity that you never heard the name of Jesus. And my mom and dad, we moved to Houston. My mom and dad got divorced, and that was when I was 13, and that was a very pivotal time in my life. I wouldn't have told you that then. I don't think I could have told you then how big a deal that was. But I realized it much later. And then probably at 15, 16, I started realizing I was bigger than my mom, and I really didn't have to do what she told me to do. If you know my mom, she's kind of a force of nature. So that wasn't working out very well in our household.
Well, yeah.
And at about the same time, I started going to a youth group in Houston. And the leader of that youth group obviously could tell I wasn't a Christian, and we started getting together. And he led me to Christ. And not only did he lead me to Christ, but he just died last year.
Wow!
And he's been a really active, involved part of my life for my whole life.
Wow!
And that was a wonderful blessing that I had. And not only did I have him, but then I had several other men who became mentors of mine, and from there I went on to Texas Tech, and I went to Texas Tech as a person who'd been a believer for a year or two, but I was very intent on becoming a much more involved, much more knowledgeable believer. So Texas Tech was a really important time for me. I was involved in a group called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. I was a leader, and I really dug into Christianity and the Bible, and grew my faith, and grew my the guy who led me to the Lord not only led me to the Lord, but gave me a vision for disciple making.
Wow!
And so that was always something, I would say, from the time I was 18 on, that I understood was my mission, and a lot of the groups that I got in, a lot of the things that I did emphasized and helped me become a disciple maker.
What an encouragement for all those people laboring in youth ministry now.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, I love that story. I mean, I love that sort of mentor of yours involvement, such long term. Sometimes people are just for a season, and that's great, but I just think that had to be hard, moving around. Parents have a divorce. I mean, none of these things you control, by the way. I mean, you're
Right.
Subject to whatever's happening in the family. and then you show up at this youth group, I mean, and for that person to have identified that, and for you to have accepted it, I mean, anyway, I just think that's an encouragement for somebody who's maybe on the fence about inviting that kid to have a,
Yes.
breakfast with them or something.
Well, and I would say one of the great joys of my life is the last 2 years of his life, actually the last 10 years of his life, we did a lot together, but the last 2 years of his life, he was very infirm and very, just didn't have a lot to offer most people.
Yeah.
But I could visit with him, and it was hard for him to understand, because he had been a disciple maker his whole life. He had led a lot of people to Christ.
Wow.
He felt useless. And I was able to say to him, for you to live as Christ and to die as gain, for you to continue to live for Christ and to die in Christ is a powerful testimony to me and everybody else I'll ever talk to. So you hang in there. And that was just I'm glad the Lord gave me those words, because that was a great encouragement to him.
And I think some people do struggle with finishing well. And I think even though he wasn't able to maybe physically do the things he wanted to, what a great blessing that you gave him to encourage him, because he was living it out till the end.
Yeah, and it was a blessing for me. And it was one of those things where, yes, I would go, and yes, it was a blessing for him, but it was a huge blessing for me, and I would bring my sons and my grandsons, and I would bring different people that I had helped lead to the Lord or become disciple makers. And I could actually introduce the man who led me to Christ to his spiritual grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren in the Lord.
It was just sharing his name. What a blessing.
It's a blessing.
What was his name?
Paul.
His
name was Paul.
Love it.
And he was a judge in Houston for years and years and years, and did all kinds of huge ministry in Houston.
It also, I find this to be fascinating, how I think there's a stereotype, and maybe for good reason, of people going off to college and, maybe whatever faith they had kind of blows up in their first, philosophy class or whatever. There's sort of that. But, we've had quite a few people we've interviewed who college was a dividing line, but it was a dividing line for the positive in faith. So I find that interesting. Was that difficult for you, or was it pretty easy to find your people?
That was not difficult for me. Yeah. I went to college with a goal. I knew what I was trying to do, and I was all in. And in fact, I would say to people today, I went to Bel Air High School in Houston. I had a lot of very highly intelligent, high-performing people that I graduated with. And so I actually didn't think I was that smart.
Right.
And so I went to college thinking, man, I'm really going to have to bear down.
You got to step it up.
And I did.
Yeah.
I did step it up. But one of the things that I look back on now, because my freshman year, I was so involved in really reading and understanding the Bible, and I did it a lot, that put my brain on steroids. And I realize now that a lot of my success in college was because I was really involved in spiritual formation and disciple making and Bible studies and really trying to understand the Bible. So my brain was kind of on steroids in a way. And I that's been a wonderful thing for me to tell people, high school seniors, when you go off to college, you want to step it up big time. And it will not only be good for you, it'll be good for your relationship with the Lord, but it'll be good for your grades.
Yeah, I love that. Studying the Bible made your brain on steroids almost. I mean, just inquisitive and having that thing. And frankly, it's kind of the opposite of maybe too much partying, which is what a lot of people maybe get sucked into. And I'm sure there was.
I was also a cheapskate, so I would never have done partying. I would not have paid for food when somebody had already or drink when it was already bought for me. So I went to Texas Tech. I worked in the summers. I worked during school, and I had a few little scholarships. But I made money going to school, and I remember graduating from college thinking, "What is this big deal about how college is so expensive?" I thought I maybe want to stay here longer.
What were some of your summer jobs?
So my best summer job was before I went to college. I worked for 3DI, the architecture and engineering firm in Houston. They were in the Galleria. And as a 17-year-old senior in high school, they gave me a car to drive around and deliver plans. And I had a beeper. Oh, it was the coolest job. And then every summer, I would get a different job every summer, but a lot of them would be associated with like 3DI or other groups like that they weren't internships. I don't know they had internships back then. I never thought of an internship. I just thought of jobs that helped me make money. And then during school, I was a resident assistant, so I lived in the dorm, and that paid for my dorm. And it was a great experience.
Well, so this is a little foreshadowing into the early architecture exposure into the real estate. Do you think that was what kind of planted the seed for later, or was that unconnected, do you think?
My mother had a personnel business, and her first office was in Post Oak Tower. And that was back when Gerald Hines had put Post Oak Tower up. And so on Saturday mornings, this would have been, say, 1972, 73, I would be wandering around the Galleria. And I had this, I think I would have said, yeah, this is cool, building stuff, that's cool. But frankly, what I always knew was cool from probably 71, 72 was the Gerald Hines organization. So I had this this vision of what a great group it was. And so even now, I sort of lost touch with that until I went off to business school and came back. But I could have told you, oh goodness, for probably from the time I was 15 until I got a job with him, that the place I would want to work, if I could work anywhere, was the Gerald Hines organization, what was called then Gerald Hines.
I love that backstory of just wandering around the Galleria in the early.
And in fact, we've Jeff Hines, Gerald Hines' son, and I have calculated that we were both there at the same time. He was there with his dad, and I was wandering around trying to see what doors were unlocked and stuff like that. I mean, we probably ran into each other and didn't know.
Exactly. That's crazy. Okay, well, take us through it. Now, did you go into public accounting first and then grad school?
Yes, I went into public accounting. I loved it. A lot of people, I was in audit. I just thought it was incredibly fun. I would go on these audits to different, where I do inventories and things.
Oh, yeah.
And I learned so much about the businesses. I found out if you go to a carbon black plant and you ask somebody, well, tell me about carbon black, man, you get an answer. And I learned a lot about different businesses. And so that was my background before I went to business school. I always knew, I knew that I was going to do something and not just the normal path there. And I had determined probably a couple of years into it that I was either going to go to business school, a particular business school, or I was going to go overseas with Arthur Young. I was going to go on one of their overseas where you spend 2 years basically doing tax returns in Djibouti or someplace like that. And anyway, both of those opportunities came up, but I wound up going to business school.
Now, but did you pay for it yourself? Because you didn't have to go back to public accounting, did you?
I did not. I like I told you, people frequently referred to me as Frugal Dougal. Between the time that I graduated from college and went to business school, in public accounting, I was single. I just felt like I had more money than you could possibly imagine. So I saved up enough money, and that's what put me through business school. And I had money left over. So I was now I live very frugally. In fact, my last year when I knew I was going to business school, this would have been say 1983. I was leading the same youth group where I became a believer, and I knew a lot of the parents, and I basically just didn't have a place to live. I just would house sit for people.
Wow.
And while I had my job, so I didn't have rent.
Oh my God.
I had won my car in a raffle. I mean, I had a lot. I saved a lot of money. I just didn't spend any money. In fact, I didn't spend any money on food. They would always tell me, if anything's in the refrigerator or the freezer, just eat it. And when they came home, there was nothing left in the refrigerator or the freezer.
Oh my gosh, that's couch surfing as a public accounting person. I love.
Yes.
All right, so okay, you go off to Harvard Business School, you get out, you pay for it yourself. That's amazing. Most people are trying to find somebody to finance it for them, but most people, like I was in public accounting, a lot of public accounting people don't do that because you're sort of on this financial track already. What was it that drew you to business school? Usually you want to make a little bit of a career hop.
Yes.
Was that in mind? Why did you want that education?
Okay, so I don't think I would have told you I was necessarily in for education. I only wanted to go to Harvard Business School, and if that hadn't worked out, I'm not sure I would have gone to business school. I had through a particular group learned about the case method and the things that they did, and just decided that was for me. And or I was going to go overseas. I saw both of those as an opportunity to broaden my reach. And I couldn't have told you then that I wanted to own my own business, but I could have told you that I wanted to run something.
Okay.
And I had always, anything I ever did, I was always the leader, or I made the leader's, life so miserable that they made me the leader. So,
right.
And I just had determined that one way or the other, I was going to run something. And it seemed to me that the way to do that was to do this.
Well, that totally makes sense because it is management. I mean, that is the track that is more normal. But then you come back, and is the first job back from at Heinz?
At Heinz, yes.
So how did that transpire? I mean, it's interesting.
Well,
that you came home essentially to Houston.
That's right. I got married in between my first and second year of business school, and so my wife was there our second year, and that was a lot of fun. We knew we were going to come back to Houston. Both our families were here. And that was during 1985. Houston was kind of in a slump.
Yeah.
And really, frankly, I'd interviewed, I'd done a lot of stuff. I didn't have a job. And we just said, well, let's pack up, let's go to Houston, and I'll start looking again.
Wow.
And just on my way back, they called me from Heinz saying, well, there might be this opportunity. And I still remember, I thought they were messing with me. I thought, like I was the third guy, and they weren't sure where they were going to get the second guy. And so I just said something like, well, I'd be interested, but I'd have to know by Wednesday, or, some
put a little pressure
like that. In retrospect, some silly thing like that. Right. And anyway, so they gave me a job, and it was a wonderful job. It was similarly, it was a project manager, 1985, 86. Real estate in Houston. Nobody knew that it was going to be another 10-year slog. Exactly. Everybody thought, it was going to turn around any day now. And it was a great job because I learned one thing: leasing. That's the only thing that made any sense for anybody who wanted to be in Houston. And in the Heinz organization at the time, that was very valuable to them. And so that made a lot of, that was good for me, because I learned it and I was good at it. And that's what I did from 1985 to 1991. And then it was pretty apparent at the time that I wasn't going to move from Houston, but that if you wanted to get ahead in the Heinz organization, go to the next level, you had to move to Cincinnati or to China or someplace. You had to get some concrete on your boots. And that was not going to happen to me. So I went and became a partner in a money management firm. Similarly, I didn't see that as I just met the main owner, and we liked each other, and he wanted to hire me, and he frankly wanted to pay me more money than I was worth, and so I thought, well, why not? And I was already a CPA, and I became a CFA through that process, and I enjoyed that. I can say this now. The guy that I won't say his name, but the guy, he has since died, but the guy I worked for turned out to not be a great guy.
Okay.
And in fact, when he finally fired me, which I now tell stories. I do a lot of work in prison with a group called the Prison Entrepreneurship Program. And I tell the guys, the best thing that ever happened to me in business was being fired. And, but this guy not only fired me, but he was planning on making sure and burning every bridge I had.
Wow.
And what he would say, and I was still trying to get a normal job because, because, you know, I had a Harvard Business School, I had a good resume, people were paying me more money than I was worth. It was kind of hard to say no. I had 4 young kids at home, but he did me an incredible favor because I couldn't get another job. When people would call for a reference, he would say, well, Dougal's a nice young man, very honest, but, you know, I'm not sure if he has fire in his belly for business. He's more of a ministry guy.
Oh.
And that was just the kiss of death. And it was the thing that ultimately led me to start my own business.
That's crazy. So, well, I thank you for sharing the kind of that vulnerable story, because I think that's, I know it's one of my favorite things about having these conversations is the setbacks and how God uses it as a setup, you know,
Yes,
and that,
yes,
because you could tell that story that, oh, and then in 91, you don't have to tell all that stuff, you know, but I like that you're honest about that was clearly a difficult time. And frankly, real estate, I mean, in 91, while you're doing that, I'm working the war room at the RTC in DC for Arthur Anderson, selling the asset, you know, a bunch of commercial real estate stuff. So that was not an easy time, but maybe it was a good time to start a real estate business.
Well,
what was the idea?
And you know, again, God was in it, but we wound up I got fired in 94. My wife, we had 4 kids. My wife and I said, okay, we're going to take a great vacation. So that summer of 95, we went on a 29-day, 6,711-mile trip from here to Calgary and back. And our kids were young, 4 kids. It was a great trip. And the day I got back, when I thought I was just going to have to, you know, get a job as an assistant manager at a Jack in the Box or something, I found out about this building, which was the first building we bought. And it's complicated to tell about it, but suffice it to say, in 1995, I'm probably the only guy that you know that bought a building, 100,000 square foot building, for $1.75 per square foot.
Wow.
So I bought the whole building for less money than we owned our house in Houston.
Wow.
And the only way I could make it make sense is I had to say to my wife, who is an architect, now, honey, I'm pretty sure this isn't going to happen. I'm going to try to make it not happen, but we're going to be putting every penny of our money into this building.
Right.
And there's a possibility, ever so slight, that we might have to sell our house and move into this building.
Wow.
And just want you to think about that. And she wound up going to the building with me the next day. We drew a plan. She said, now I want to have a real bathroom. I don't want the kids going down the hall to the bathroom. I want to have a real kitchen. And I said, honey, we will have money to spend on the build out of your house. It'll be on the top floor of this 100,000 square foot building. And it'll be a cool house, you know, the 5th floor. But we never had to do that.
Oh my gosh. Classic. She was designing her own home in your commercial building.
That's right.
Just
and you know, 1995, the market, in fact, people have told me since then, even though I would tell people, I called on 72 different groups and individuals to raise money. I didn't get a penny from anybody. So I had to buy it 100% myself. And trust me, that felt incredibly, I mean, it was every penny we had plus some. And but I was going to be the property manager, the leaser, the
Chief bottle
security,
washer.
everything. And it turned out that you could smell the turnaround the day we closed. I mean, the turnaround wasn't clear to people until the next year. But Houston turned around in a big way, and that building was worth 20 times what I bought it for in a year.
Wow.
And now again, you and I know that's not because I'm smart, because I would tell people I didn't know when the market was going to turn around. I had no idea that it would turn around that fast. I'm glad it did.
Right.
But my pitch was, I can lease space, and if you'll just work with me, the market will turn around. And even if it takes 10 years, we can hold this building for 10 years, and it'll certainly be worth 2, 3, 5 times what we bought it for.
Wow. So that was a very fortunate first deal, the way it turned out, and it sounds like that kind of led you to this thing. So I know there's a million deals to talk about, but since then, how would you describe kind of your niche, if there is one, or that kind of thing? How has that developed over the years? And then we'll get into kind of the platform and how you think about that.
Well, basically, our niche was, I would sometimes say things like, we're trying to buy buildings that we can operate to a Heinz standard, a high octane Class A standard, but that are much, much cheaper. And so what we would try to say is, we would love for you to be a Heinz type customer, but who doesn't want to pay the higher prices to be in a nice, new, classy building, but still has to have good cleaning, good security, Heinz type management. And that's what we did. And so our goal was to have a bunch of smaller type tenants that we took care of. And so we bought a lot of buildings along Richmond Avenue, a bunch of buildings in San Antonio. We were very successful in the 90s. And then, we went through the whole Enron 9/11 crash, and then ultimately bought the Esperson building downtown in 2005. And it was the perfect example of what we were trying to accomplish. We actually owned that building until last year. We actually don't have any buildings right now. We have sold everything. The office building business has become very, very unpredictable, and every building that I've ever owned is much, much cheaper than we've sold it for. And frankly, the offers we're making today, like I'm making an offer today, next week, on a building that my offer is less than 10% of the basis that they have in the building.
Right.
And office buildings, just because of stay from home and COVID and new technology, if you're the best new Heinz building, you're in great shape. If you're the worst building, you're going to get torn down. But if you're in between, nobody quite knows what to do, how to finance it. And when you get it cheap enough, you can't afford to spend any money on build out or brokerage commissions. So you're either going to have to find tenants that say, I like the way it is, or you're going to have something that's like a co-work type of offering. And so we're basically, we would be fine as a company, not ever buying another building, but we're making offers, but they are low offers.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's
so
incredible.
you're really kind of a niche player who has the advantage of not having to always be long. I mean, you can get out.
Right.
So you have that sort of capital flexibility that not everybody has, where they have to be long by their business model. So, well, this makes me want to go off on a whole interest rate tangent, but I guess we'll save that for another discussion over a sandwich sometime. But so tell us about, so now you've been a believer. I love your story about coming to faith as really at high school, wasn't it? Or
yes, 17.
So how did your faith sort of play out over these years? I know I was just looking at your website. Your vision statement is to, honor God and serve people and that sort of thing. So you were kind of an early mover to think like this, and of course, that's what we're trying to do with this podcast, is kind of promote this idea of thinking like that. How has that colored your business life, your faith?
So I wouldn't have told you this, but we hired a consultant. Oh, this is probably 1998, and one of the things he said to all of my employees at the time, you need to understand that Dougal views Cameron Management as a platform for ministry. You need to realize that. He wants it to be successful because he wants to have a successful ministry, but he views it as a platform for ministry. And when he first said that, I thought, that is not true. I want to run, but as the more he talked about it, the more I realized he's right. And that was a vision I had. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to do well. You cannot have a platform for ministry if you're not making money and you're not successful. But there were other things that were important to me. And one of the things that happened is I organized my business over and over again. So if I needed to work 80 hours a week, some week or some weeks or for a year or whatever, I could. But I was organized so that I had very high octane people around me. And if I had ministry opportunities, I could do them. And that has worked well for me, and frankly, well for the people who've worked with me. We tried to make sure that there was a ownership structure in Cameron Management, that even though I controlled it, the people who worked for me long term could feel like and were owners. And so, and that's allowed me to do wonderful things that I care about. My wife and I have a marriage counseling and hospitality ministry here in Chapel Hill, where we live. We've been here for 25 years. I do a lot with the prison entrepreneurship program, which as it's turned out, many of the things that happen to me in life, like my parents getting divorced, and I could never have told you in my 20s that I had a thing that we now use in prison called the father wound.
Yeah.
But because of my background, I had the father wound. Fortunately, Christ dealt with it. And but it gives me a position with the guys in prison. I'm not saying to them, you have something I don't have. And having been fired, there's a bunch of things that have happened to me in life that I now value a lot because it helps me in ministry with the guys in prison.
I mean, what really strikes me about your story, first of all, I just love your candor. But most of the people I know that went to Harvard Business School, most of your classmates go on to run giant companies, right? They're hired management people with huge pay packages, frankly, okay, in the C-suite of public companies, all right? And the fact that you kind of were sort of forced to start. I mean, you have leadership capabilities and you wanted to go there, but that's not the path you took. And so that's very unique for your background. I think the other thing that I find, we gotta hear the story about how you started volunteering in the prisons. Not a lot of HBS guys are probably volunteering in the prisons. How did that come about?
Well, this is actually an interesting story. So in 1995, a friend of mine, just invited me to go to prison with a group called the Bill Glass Crusade, and it's in really some of the worst prisons in Huntsville, and it's a wonderful time where people are telling prisoners about Christ. But these prisons, you're interacting with some of the worst of the worst. Like one of the things I tell people that they don't know about prison is Texas prisons have about 150,000 men in them, felons. 50,000 of them are just stupid young men who did stupid young men things. They're low-hanging fruit. Those guys want to never come back to prison. But there's another 50,000 men on the other side who are truly evil, bad men. They are men that would slit your throat in a heartbeat. And being around those men, this Bill Glass Crusade was around those men, it's hand-to-hand combat with Satan. It's hard work. And I came home after that one day in prison, told my wife, 1995, maybe 96 or 97, 4 young kids at home, honey, I'm not doing this anymore. I mean, this is going to take me days to detox from just feeling like this hand-to-hand combat with Satan. So I had decided I wasn't doing prison ministry anymore. And fast forward, I started teaching entrepreneurialism at various places. I taught classes at Rice. I taught at the Acton MBA in Austin. And then somebody came to talk to me, I'd say in 2007, about the prison entrepreneurship program. That's a story in itself that's great to hear about. But I said, hey, I'll give you some money, but I don't do prison ministry. And they said, no, this is different. And it is different. I mean, these guys, they are so much fun to be around. Every meeting I have with these guys, it's like being in the best church service you've ever been in. Yeah. Guys who are redeemed and they're excited about life, and great things are happening. And from 1995 until I really got involved with the prison entrepreneurship program, I'd say in a big way in 2010, it had become apparent to me that my calling in life was to model, mentor, and message 3 life habits: love Jesus, live entrepreneurially, and work hard. And there's a bunch of things I was doing: the Children's Business Fair, a thing called E-Cubed, Entrepreneurially Energized Eagles with high school kids. And so there's a bunch of stuff that I was doing. But of all the things I was doing, the thing that fit my calling the best was the prison entrepreneurship program.
That's crazy. Okay, let's walk through that again. Yeah. Model, mentor, and what was the third M?
Model, mentor, message. 3 life habits.
Okay.
And the life habits are: 1, love Jesus.
Yeah.
2, live entrepreneurially. And 3, work hard. And the reason when I say love Jesus, I frequently, if I'm talking to either a non-Christian group or a group that I don't know where they are spiritually, I'll say right away, now look, I can talk about other things. So we don't feel like I'm just going to talk about Jesus, but that's central to who I am. I like talking about Jesus. If you ask me questions, I'm going to talk more about Jesus. But, I'm going to go on and talk about live entrepreneurially. It hopefully gives an audience the ability to hear that I would like to talk about Jesus, but not feel like they're going to get banged on the head. And that's what they didn't come for that. So it gives me that opportunity.
How did you come up with that framework?
How did I come up with that framework? I'm not sure. I could find out that I came up, somebody else had it before me. And if they did, I will give them attribution, but I don't think I did.
To develop it, it sounds like. It doesn't sound like you know.
Yeah, no, it came over time, although I could articulate that. I would say by 2002, I was regularly articulating that as I know how I did it. From my business school time, I have a group of 4 men that I still get on a call with every month, Bible study that we had, and we have an accountability group, and we have to share with each other our yearly plan and our life plan, and that changes over time. And that process of saying, what's my life plan, what's my calling, is what ultimately got me to that point. And asking that question. And I would say somewhere, and I could look back at my notes and figure it out, and I'd say 2002, 2003, it became apparent to me that was my calling.
I love it. I think it does sometimes take a little peer group to kind of help craft those things. And I bet you've been helpful, and they've been helpful to you to maybe work on that language, or at least test it.
Yes. They tested it, and then they would ask questions. Well, okay, what about this? What about that? And I had a lot of people that would say, yeah, I see it. I see you modeling this.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also
Affirming,
see this.
But sharpening, maybe.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it totally makes sense. And I know Halftime does a great job of that. I had lunch with Tom McGahee, who's involved in that, and they have little groups, peer groups that help with that. That help me kind of craft my life calling and that sort of thing. So,
and I'm a reader, so I read a lot of books. So it would not surprise me if I read a Halftime book, and that's
right. Some of that language,
yeah,
came from other sources. So I'm just thinking, this is so great because you're a natural mentor. I mean, that's in your 3Ms. What would you tell somebody behind you on this journey? Some entrepreneur, maybe they're, as we were talking before we started recording, maybe they're 40, 45, maybe things are going well in the business, and they're a little uncomfortable maybe with just following the worldly path of consumption. What advice would you give them, kind of that younger entrepreneur?
So this is advice I give to young believers all the time, especially men. Do not get isolated. You must have accountability. You've got to have eyeball to eyeball accountability with other men. And one of the great things about the groups that we're in and Halftime, all these other groups, is there's other Christian men who love the Lord, who are prepared to get together with you, but you can't let yourself get isolated. I've had 2 Bible studies that I've done for my whole, actually my whole life. And I've had these guys that have been in this accountability group with me since college, but I've had men even from the time I became a believer, 17, 18, who are still friends of mine. We still get together and we encourage each other and exhort each other. You've got to have that. And the people I see that get into trouble or never launch are people who get isolated.
Could not agree more. I think the enemy, let's acknowledge we have an enemy.
Yes.
Wants to put us in our corners and convince us, especially as business leaders, that everybody wants something from us. So I'm just going to live in my gated community. You know what I mean? I mean, it's easy, frankly, to isolate yourself, and then it gets weird. I mean, it gets weird. I get weird if I get too isolated. My decision making is not great, frankly.
And I regularly say to young men, the one thing God says right at the beginning is it is not good for man to be alone. Yes, that's a reason you need to find a wife. So that ought to be a plan, but it's more than that. It's don't be isolated. And the Bible studies I lead or I'm involved in, if a man gets in the Bible study, he says I'm in, then I say, now I just want you to know that I'm going to make your life miserable if you start not showing up. Not right at first, but what I have found over and over and over again, I found it the hard way, is men who start not showing up and it was that. They're the ones who get into trouble, and you all of a sudden find out they're getting divorced and the whole 9 yards. And that's exactly what Satan wants, is isolated men who don't have accountability.
Exactly. Well, what a great encouragement. And this has been so much fun, Dougal. Thanks so much for joining us.
You are so welcome. I've enjoyed this immensely.
Lots of nuggets of wisdom in there. And thanks everybody for joining us on the podcast. Subscribe, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.